Hi, it's Joey Reynolds. That's me. I'm the one that's in the top square. Below me is Bryan Rigg, and then to my side is Jay Sorensen. Take the fifth call, will you? Now, Jay and I met a long time ago in Lakewood, New Jersey. He was at a nightclub. He was playing music, and he was playing records, And the first guy I ever had seen who went from one record to another without interrupting them. We used to always talk between records on the radio. And Jay was doing this in a club, and it was a dance mix, but we didn't call it that, and nobody knew about that yet. Yeah. Because there were too many white people. Yeah. So Jay came out, and he was doing that, and I said, why don't we do that on the radio? And I had a radio station there, and we did it on the radio, and it worked pretty good. And Jay's been, I named him Jay the Jock. Yeah. And he stayed playing. So we go to NBC in New York. Here we are, 30 Rockefeller Center. We replaced Howard Stern. We got the biggest job in the world, and the greatest place in the world, 30 Rockefeller Center. We go into the studio, and Jay's got his Captain Kirk lunch bucket. I said, Jay, they have a commissary here. You don't have to bring a lunch that your wife packed so that you would be hungry between New Jersey and here.
That was fun.
So that was it. For years we did that, and then of course I didn't see him for a long time. He punished me, and then we got together again. I was in WOR alone for all those years with Myra. Of course, Myra was my producer, and I met Bryan Rigg. Now Bryan's with us tonight. Bryan is a guy who came to us through. He was an author for one thing. There's a lot of things. But Myra thought that he would be a very interesting guest because he had done some very different things. Besides being a U.S. Marine, you joined you joined the Israeli Army, right? Mm-hmm. Now, in what order was that, Bryan?
In 1998, I was in a special unit called Marva in the Israeli military, and then in 1999, I joined the Marine Corps as a officer.
And what did you become? What officer?
Well, I was just a second lieutenant. I was originally an air contract. I was hopefully going to fly either F-18s or Cobras, but I got injured. But since I had a PhD, they stuck me in a think tank called the Warfighting Lab at the basic school. And so for the next 2 years while I was trying to get healed to go back on active duty, I took care of a library, gave lectures, and developed reading guides for the Commandant's reading list. So it sounds more glorious than what it was, but that's what was in the history of the Marine Corps, I'm the only librarian you've ever met. I was the most elite force you can imagine. So.
Well, how did you do with the Israeli Army? Were you good with those guys?
Oh, yeah. It was a unique unit called Marva, and it was helping people who lived outside of Israel who were of Jewish descent to potentially think about making aliyah or immigrating to Israel. So
you're not Jewish, though, are you?
Well, by Jewish law, I am. Through my mother, I have Jewish descent. So by halakha, if you have a Jewish mother, you're considered a Jew. So a lot of these people from South Africa, Australia, England, they would go to this unit, and it gives you a feel for what Israel's like to serve in the military. But it also helps you learn more about the society. So it was a unique unit that I was a part of, and I did that for 10 weeks in the summer of 1998.
Wow. Well, Jay here has you share something in common. First of all, his mother is a Jew, and so he's a Jew, and also he's a devout coward, right? Isn't that what you are?
Of course. Actually, Nixon stopped the draft in 1974, I think it was. I was number 3 on the lottery. They stopped it at 2.
But Jay, a hard war to be a part of.
Well, Jay's nephew, or grandson rather, has just come through.
He just
go ahead.
He just graduated from Paris Island.
So, congratulations, Semper Fi. Yep. Hey, did you go to the graduation? Jay, did you go there for it?
No, we couldn't. They wouldn't allow us to go. They were still quarantined.
Okay. It's one of the most remarkable events when you see those young men and women become Marines. And you go through that graduation. But yes, from what I understand, the last couple of months, obviously, due to the pandemic, you're not able to go and see that transformation in the flesh.
We were heartbroken. We were heartbroken to not be able to go. However, we do have snapshots and of just about everything they did the whole time they were there. Thousands of them now. We were sent that via.
You have surveillance shots, right?
Well, they're not. Well, no. See, I can't say exactly what they were doing. I can't say where they just went. I can't do anything like that, and that's security, and I understand that. We wanted to go. We were ready to go, and then this COVID-19 happened, and that was that. So, we may not see him for a year. Who knows? I mean, we don't know where he's going to go from here.
Well, congratulations. I mean, when you meet him, you'll see a total transformation of the young man.
I've already seen it in the pictures. It's amazing. And do you know what he said? He finally was able to call us. He said, Pop-Pop and Grandma, I've had more fun doing this, and I learned more about myself than my entire 20 years of life.
Yeah.
To me, that was incredible.
And there's a picture of him with the dress on. It's a GIF.
Yes, that was the transformation.
Yeah. But you can use the men's room and the ladies' room at Starbucks.
Well, yeah, you can.
Anyway, it's fun. I'm just having fun. But, the Marines have been a wonderful organization, and I have such great regard. And, Brian, I did the documentary with the making of a Marine.
Mm-hmm.
And I went through everything that I possibly could. We had a 12-year-old kid who wanted to be, he wanted full dress. He was a Make-A-Wish kid, and he wanted to be made a Marine. And he was. He was, he died a year later, so it's sad. But it was a wonderful honor, wonderful honor. He got what he wanted, and Jay was saying to me earlier, his grandson got what he wanted too, since he was a kid, right?
Yeah, from the time he was 5 years old, and my wife can back that up. Andrea said she remembers vividly sitting on the couch with him, and they were watching something on television, and he goes, Grandma, I want to be a Marine. It's like, wow.
Was watching Jack Nicholson.
But it's very unusual for a 5-year-old to know what they wanted to be. It took me till I was 10 that I wanted to be on the radio. But at 5 years old, he had the wherewithal to figure it all out. And he has a very high IQ, which may...
Oh, you always say that, like that's important. That doesn't mean shit. Have a high IQ doesn't mean anything. I mean, you got the President of the United States has a high IQ. Duh.
Does he? Are you sure?
Yeah. I mean, by the book, by the education standard. Come on.
All right.
That doesn't mean anything. Why do we always have? Wait a minute. Only because I have a low IQ do I say this.
Well, maybe I think, Jay, I don't want to project on here, but you're saying maybe he had a high sense of situational awareness when he was a young kid to kind of understand what he wanted to be, which most people don't have. I mean, I'm 49. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. Well, I love Ronald Reagan. I mean, since we're bringing some politics and presidents in, a lot of people love him, hate him. But one thing he said that was wonderful for the Marine Corps, he says, a lot of people go through their whole lives wondering if they made a difference. Marines don't have that problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's not politics. Ronald Reagan was a broadcaster. There's no politics in broadcasting.
Of course not, Joy.
Politics in everything. Politics in a family. I mean, they vote me out every week. I had where there's a will, there's a relative. The same. So Bryan Rigg. Now let's go to this for a minute. Bryan, you don't know anything about him, Jay, and I hit you with Bryan, but you don't know that he's a celebrated guy in many ways because, first of all, he was written about the Holocaust, famously, and for a long time, and many books. So that's how I came to know him. And of course, I did the show from Israel. And having been in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and the every place, Dead Sea, Masada, which is how you say boring in Hebrew. But there's a definite way that you really change your life when you go through the Holocaust museums. And Yad Rashid in Israel is great. I'm sure you've been there, Bryan.
Yeah, Yad Vashem.
Yeah.
Very powerful.
You see all the kids' shoes. They had the kids. They used the kids for slave labor, the Nazis, and they and their clothing is all hanging all over. I mean, you got to cry when you go through there. It's awful. I didn't mean to bring it up to bring everybody down, but it's the reality of life.
Mm-hmm.
So Bryan, now where are you with this whole Holocaust thing? Bring me up to date here.
Well, thanks so much, Joey, for the plug. I've written 4 books on World War II and the Holocaust. The 2 books in that genre that I'm most well known for is Hitler's Jewish Soldiers, about Jews and men of Jewish descent who served in the Nazi military during World War II. And then I wrote a book that came out in 2004, and then I did a second edition in 2016 called The Rabbi Saved by Hitler's Soldiers. And it's how the Lubavitcher rabbi, the Chabad rabbi, very famous ultra-Orthodox Jewish group, was rescued by German officers, many of them of Jewish descent, and they got him out. He was basically like the Jewish Pope. That's what they were saying he was to the U.S. government at the time, and they got him out and got him to America. So it's a really weird story about how our U.S. government worked with the Nazi Secret Service to rescue the highest-ranking rabbi out from underneath the nose of the SS and get him to America. And now the largest Hasidic community in the world is based out of Brooklyn, New York. That's Lubavitchers, the Chabad. So my 5th book that I just brought out about the Marine Corps is about Iwo Jima, Japan's Holocaust, and then a Medal of Honor recipient named Woody Williams. One of the largest ships in the U.S. Navy was just commissioned after him, named after him a year and a half ago, christened after him, and then it was commissioned in February. It's called the ESB number 4 Expeditionary Sea Base Ship number 4 USS Woody Williams. It basically has the displacement tonnage of 2 Titanics. So 5 years ago, I went to Iwo Jima to commemorate the 70th commemoration of the battle. And I met this gentleman, Woody Williams, a Medal of Honor recipient, and I met another 30 Marines. And I was thinking, you know what? Nobody's ever written about his life. So I thought, hey, I want to write about his life, but use his life to tell about a Holocaust that not too many people know about, and that's the Japanese Holocaust. Whereas Hitler slaughtered 6 million Jews, and horrible, and like Joey was just mentioning, going to Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, how it really changes people's lives, especially knowing that of the 6 million Jews, almost 1.5 million of those were under the age of 10. It's horrifying. But what people don't realize is that Japan slaughtered 3 times that amount. They slaughtered 22 million people. And unlike the Germans, who have paid 90 billion in reparations, Japan's only paid 1 billion. And they deny it, they don't write about it, they don't acknowledge it, unlike the Germans, and it's disgraceful. So I use this new book called Flamethrower to talk about these issues. And the reason why I call it Flamethrower is that getting back to the Medal of Honor recipient, Woody Williams, and using his life to tell the story and tell the chapters about Japan's Holocaust, the Pacific War, Iwo Jima, how he got his medal was he used the weapon, the flamethrower, to incinerate, dozens of Japanese potentially in one day. And about 1/3 of all Japanese killed on Iwo Jima were killed by flamethrowers. And a lot of people don't realize this. This is why I call it Flamethrower. But to get to the Holocaust theme, and me being a genocide Holocaust historian, I wanted to put this Holocaust on the map. So that's what I've been doing, Joey, the last 5 years, is writing my 5th book on World War II and the Holocaust, but now focusing on the Pacific campaign and not focusing on Nazi Germany and the European campaign.
Well, we had a lot in common. When I first met you, I took you over to Bikram Yoga to take a class in the hot room.
We went there several times.
So, Bryan gets up, and first of all, as a Marine, he starts doing push-ups. Now, we're all meditating and on the blanket waiting for the sweat. And Bryan is doing push-ups and sit-ups and stand-ups, and he's on his head, on his knees. And I said, this guy ain't going to make it. This will be an hour and a half of the routine, and he's not going to get after. He blew his load. But you did. You got through it, and you liked it too, I think.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Yeah, I was right over there on the west side, and just push-ups. Everybody was looking at me kind of weird, and you were shaking your head, but that's how I kind of warm up before yoga. It's very unorthodox, but I enjoy it.
Well, it was that pink spandex. That's what did it.
With the Marine Corps symbol on it.
Oh yeah, right.
That'll work.
The Marines are really given you the great texture that you need. The world texture. I think you have an international education from that. I believe that's
The
where it
Marine
came.
Corps, it's really interesting, and you'll see this, Jay, with your grandson.
Uh-huh.
In all the other services, you join and then you leave. But with the Marine Corps, you become. It's a total transformation of your identity. It's in many respects, not to be hyperbolic here, but it's almost like a cult. It is a religious group, and once you become a Marine, once a Marine, always a Marine. And you're never a former Marine or an ex-Marine. You're always a Marine.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was honored to be part of this, Joy, and it did give me a sense of belonging, a sense of giving back to my country, a sense of, supporting the democracy, but also being a part of a unique organization, a unique tribe, if you will. So, getting back to my story about being a Marine, when I got injured and was stuck in this think tank, and being maybe the first librarian of the Marine Corps, writing this history of the Marine Corps. And I've been very blessed. I've had two commandants of the Marine Corps write forwards and endorse this work. Commandant Al Gray, the 29th Commandant of the Marine Corps, and then Commandant Charles Krulak. And so I'm very honored that they gave their kosher stamp of approval of this book and that it really contributes to Marine Corps history. But I also felt a burning desire for many years, since I wasn't able to lead Marines in combat and do what I had initially signed up to do, be a combat pilot, that now I'm able to kind of give back. In the 2 years I spent being like a librarian in the Marine Corps, now I'm actually benefiting the taxpayers for paying my salary at that time to read books and give lectures and whatnot by preserving American history and Marine Corps history.
And you're a family man. You have a family.
I have 3 wonderful children. I have a 19-year-old daughter now, and then I have a 17-year-old son and a 13-year-old son. So I'm a very proud dad of my kids. Everybody knows about the Navy SEALs and the Navy. In the Army, you have the Delta Force and the Rangers. You have the PJs, the pararescue guys, and the Air Force. And those units have something in common with the Marine Corps in general. But the only service that you have that in general, they feel like the entire group is an elite unit, is the Marine Corps.
It's always good to talk to you, Bryan. We're not done yet, but it's good to see you. Last time we were together, I think, was in New York City.
Yep.
And now you are quarantined, like in Dallas, right? Are you in Texas, Dallas?
That's right. They just started opening up the society a few weeks ago. Today was the first day I, for the first time, saw traffic on the roads. And we actually went out to a little hamburger joint we normally went to. They have social distancing in there, but you're starting to see the economy slowly come alive here in Texas.
I worked on the radio in Dallas. I was on the radio at 570 KLIF.
Oh, yeah.
There. Yeah. About 20 years ago. They didn't like us because we were too New Jersey and too New York.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's getting a little bit better now, but growing up, if you were a Yankee, people did raise a skeptical eyebrow.
I still heard that virtually every day. Oh, y'all are Yankees. That was it.
Yeah. Well, my mom got in trouble. I mean, she's from Oklahoma, but when she married a guy from Philadelphia, my dad,
oh boy,
and they did a part of their honeymoon trip through the South. My dad said, I was tired of talking to people, and they were talking about how their grandfather was killed by a Yankee, during the war, of independence, as they called it down here. Like,
why is it still such an issue? Why? I mean, 160 years later is.
Well, I have all Union in my family. I have 3 great-great-grandfathers who served in the Union. One of them, David L. Davison, was under Sherman and Grant. He was at Vicksburg. He fought all the way to Atlanta. I'm very proud of that.
Wow.
And I'm glad in some respects I don't have any Confederate background. I mean, they were rebels. They were traitors. They were trying to break up our country. And but when I was growing up, Jay, I had a big Confederate flag, because I grew up in Texas. I had a big Confederate flag. I was very proud of my Southern heritage. I remember in Texas history in my Christian school, Fort Worth Christian, of the teacher saying, okay, yes, we lost the war, but we inflicted 100,000 more casualties on the Yankees than they did on us.
Oh boy.
In other words, we were better fighters, and if we just had the population, we could have kicked their backsides. And I remember one of my Pee-wee football buddies was the son of a Texas Ranger baseball player, Lamar Johnson. And he was African-American. Brian was African-American. I remember he came over to my house, and he saw that Confederate flag in my room. And he's like, "Why do you have that up there?" And I told him, "Southern pride, we're Texas boys. Don't you have one?" And then he explained to me what it meant to him. And I remember taking it down saying, that's not worth a friendship. And if that's what it symbolizes to him, oppression and racism, he's worth more to me as a friend than me thinking of Southern pride. And then, of course, later on, I get older and I realize I have 3 great-grandfathers that fought and killed Confederates. They would have been horrified that I had such a flag in my my room. But it's an interesting phenomenon that in the South you'll see Confederate flags still all over the place. You have a lot of people who feel that it is part of their manhood and part of their identity. You don't really have it up in the North per se. But that's for a whole nother probably 4 or 5 radio programs to talk about.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Yeah,
the Civil War and the Confederacy still is very much alive in the South.
You got to see what I have here on my table. I want to share this with you. You're going to probably be surprised.
We're in for it now.
Oh, look it. Can you see that?
What is it? Okay, it's Masada or
it's the Wailing
Wall.
Yeah.
The Wailing Wall. Yeah.
The Wailing Wall.
Yeah,
Jay, do you know what that is?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's where people stick money in the cracks, and I go there at night.
Well, they stick money, but they also most people stick. I didn't hear about money. That's new to me.
It's notes.
Yeah, they stick notes in there, hoping that God will answer their prayers.
Yeah. Well, I hope that we get out of this whole quarantine thing because I don't like it too much. I'm living with my ex-wife, and that's a payback.
There's a book right there.
Well, I have, as a historian, I just read Barry's book on the Great Influenza, is what it's called, the Spanish flu epidemic of 1918 to 1919, and we lost 700,000 people within basically a year out of a population of 100 million. So that'd be the equivalent of having, 2.5 million people killed right now. And we're at, right now, I guess 100,000. We eclipsed that a few days ago. So when you have that in the rearview mirror, you realize, okay, doing too much is better than not doing enough. But then on the other side, you got to think, okay, the herd mentality, getting people back to work, we're all going to get exposed eventually, and we work the problem, and viruses have always been part of our, human fabric. I don't know. There's 2 souls in my breast. One side, maybe we should have been more conservative. Another side is like, we got to just grow a pair, go forward, be strong, and work this as a society and a medical community together. I don't know. I don't have the knowledge to really be able to give the definitive answer of it, but I agree, Joey. It's kind of frustrating, this quarantine business that we've had the last couple of months, and a lot of people are hurting.
Well, I think for one thing right now, you have a separation. And if you've been watching Grant on the History Channel, which is a really good documentary, they're running it every couple of days now because it's a 3-parter. And it's very well done, and it's one of the few ones that's not on public television for a change because it's not done by, what's his name, who did the history of Mayo Clinic in the world. Yeah, this is not his. And it's well done. Grant, after Lincoln was assassinated, brought everybody together. And I don't know why we don't have someone who brings us all together. Why are we always separate? His whole campaign was to fight separatism. But that was about race and slavery. And as soon as Lincoln died, and Grant got into office, he picked up the gauntlet and ran with separatism being not allowed. And he had a wonderful administration and great success of bringing everybody together. And then, of course, after he left office, they went back to their old tricks of separate restrooms for black people. And, the part that loses, I grew up in a black neighborhood. essentially, all the white people left, and we were the last of the Italian families in a neighborhood in North Division Street in Buffalo. Not a joke, but and growing up, whenever I won a baseball game, I got a rock in my head because black kids always wanted to gang up. The black kids were in my childhood, they were the majority. So I didn't have that other gene, honest to God. I mean, I swear I never had that because I was never raised that way. We were poor. And, when you're poor, you're thinking about how you're going to eat, not how you're going to sit there and worry about whether you have a tan or not. And I never did get this whole African-American thing. I'll tell you why I say that, and I want to bring it up. I'm glad. I know that you write famously on these issues, Bryan, and it's so much of it has to do with prejudice. And I'll tell you where I changed my mind about how I was angry. I was no longer angry when I saw a film at the Avignon Film Festival at Hunter College in New York. It was transferred there a few years back, and it was an old film showed France, and black people who many of them were French colonists. The French had taken a lot of territories with people of color because that's the part of the world where you had dark skin. That's what it was. And so, they assimilated because when they went to France, there was they brought with them their culture. And it was accepted, whether you were from Morocco or Ethiopia, it was accepted by the French. So they don't have that issue. That's why white guys who like black chicks, if you pardon my way of saying it, would go to Paris because they knew they weren't going to be prejudiced. Eartha Kitt was a black woman who didn't look it, and Josephine Baker, and God bless you. And, are you an atheist? I don't know who we're going to get. So, what happened here is we got a separation in this country where all of a sudden, they never came here with their identity because they were brought here as slaves. That didn't happen in France. So that was the assimilation. It's not anything to do with the color. When all things are fair, when the playing field is fair. I don't think it's ever going to be fair. Look what's happening in Minneapolis. Now everybody it gives an excuse to act out, to show your worst. The worst part of you is that cop did wrong, and now that doesn't mean everybody got to dance in the street. The guy needs to go before the court system, go to jail. But this is not that simple. There's so much resentment.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting, what's always frustrating to me is when you look at human pigmentation. Homo sapiens, using Richard Dawkins, evolutionary biologist from Oxford. We've been around for around 200,000 years as Homo sapiens, but it was only like 20,000 years ago that we started differentiating in different groups, different pigmentation, skin colors. We're part of one race, the human race, and this evolution of skin color is a recent phenomenon, and it has evolutionary benefits. When you're up in northern England and whatnot, having white skin and blonde hair, when you don't have a lot of sunlight, you're better able to absorb vitamin D. And of course, when you're in Africa and you have dark skin, you can protect yourself from the sun. And so once we educate people how recent this phenomenon of skin color is, and that we're part of one race, the human race, I think we can get beyond it. But also getting to your story about the guys going to Paris to be able to date with interracial dating. We're seeing more of that. People dating Asians, people dating African Americans who are Caucasians, and so on. We're having more of a blend, and that I think is one step in the right direction. As we have more of a blend in society, it's like that old Yiddish phrase. It says, "Isn't it amazing that the idiot that marries your daughter can produce the most brilliant grandchild known to mankind?" And so you have that. In fact, there's a wonderful story that I have come across, and I write about this guy in my book, Flamethrower. His name is Jerry Yellen. He was a Jewish fighter pilot in World War II. I had, I think, 3.5 kills against the Japanese, and he hated the Japanese. And many, you can give many reasons why that it was justified. I mean, the Japanese were horrible people in World War II. But then he had this weird situation later on in life that one of his sons fell in love with a Japanese girl and had grandchildren, and he absolutely loves those grandchildren, and he came to forgive himself and forgive his enemy through the love of his grandchildren. And so this story kind of gives me hope that slowly but surely, mankind is marching to a more humane situation, that we are able to talk about this, Joey, talk about the racial problems, talk about the issues that, the Civil War ended in 1865, but it wasn't until the 1960s that we finally allowed them to get educated in decent schools. So the African American community is really only one generation into getting equal opportunities with education. So we have a long way to go, but boy, as far as the crooked timber of humanity that we come from, America is one of the greatest countries out there, and that we give incredible opportunities, men, women, blacks, and whites, compared to most nations, is remarkable. But we still have a long way to go, as you rightly say, Joey. And it's a slow march. It's 10 steps forward, 5 steps back. But at least we're making progress. And discussing the issues is one of the first steps in solving these problems. Which luckily we have freedom of speech in this country.
I'm looking for the day when Steve Harvey awards something to a white couple. On the Family Feud. Hey, y'all, come over here. Come on, we'll sashay ourselves. I grew up with that. Come on, y'all.
So did I.
Yeah.
Anyway, now back to this other one. The black people who are called African Americans. Okay, God bless you and me and all of us, and we're all together anyway, whether you like it or not. Now, the other thing is that I want to see equal opportunity for everybody, and I want to see education for everybody, and I want to see money for everybody. I think we need to have money to buy things. I mean, that's
one thing on that note. I mean, I hate to come back to my book again, Flamethrower, that I just wrote, but I had a very interesting chapter that I was exploring the very end of the Iwo Jima, and I came across an African American story which really impacted me. So African American troops in World War II were basically logistics troops because a lot of the American authorities felt like they couldn't fight. Now, Tuskegee Airmen has dispelled that myth and so on. But one thing on Iwo Jima that was really fascinating is that there was a last desperate attempt, a banzai charge at the very end of the battle, where they used tunnels under the island and hit us in the rear echelons, where a lot of African Americans troops were. And so these Marines all Marines are trained as riflemen. Whether you're a secretary, whether you're in logistics, whether you're in security, intelligence, everyone's trained as an infantryman, and that's what's kind of unique about the Marine Corps. Well, these African Americans were trained that way, and they set up a skirmish line, met the attack, and then defeated it. And you look at the white officers' reports on these quote-unquote Negro troops, and they're on one side totally shocked at how well they did, and on the other side, this incredible admiration that they performed incredibly well. So one thing we need about, I think, World War II, it really accelerated the process of talking about these issues, civil rights and so on, because you brought people from all different walks of life, Catholic, Jew, Protestant, black, white, Navajo Indians, with the Caucasian boys from Boston, and they learned in 10 weeks to love each other and defend each other. I've always said, one way to solve racism, getting back to the Marine Corps, I joined a unit that within 10 weeks we all became officers, and we were all different colors, different religious beliefs, and in 10 weeks we're willing to die for each other. It's almost like, if we want to solve the racism problems, make everybody go through the Marine Corps, and then we'll be fine.
Oh, yeah, just what I need. Everybody have a rifle. Oh, good. Thanks.
No.
They already have them. Everybody's got one.
Now, Jay has just experienced something racist. The Hasidic Jews in Lakewood. They are gathering when you're having this tribal wedding and funerals, and they were not practicing separation. They were not wearing masks, I don't believe, and they're getting virus, and that whole team.
It leads the county where I live in the amount of deaths and in cases.
What is what I said, right?
Yeah, well, I write about the Hasidic community now. I guess in Lakewood it's the yeshiva world, but they're the ultra Orthodox, and they're the Hasidic groups and the ultra Orthodox of the yeshiva world are very difficult people to deal with. And if they believe that you are going against any of their creeds, they will label you every name under the book. And quite often, a lot of their belief structures are very racist in themselves. You know, as any extreme religious belief is, it becomes usually very bigoted. But I saw those pictures, Jay, and I didn't know that was in your neighborhood, of all these funerals and when the people were coming through and they were gathering, and they've had a huge outbreak of the virus and people dying, correct?
Yes, yes, indeed. So it got under control. But now I think because there's this notion that, oh, things are getting better. We're starting stage 2. Oh, let's go outside. And so kids are riding their bikes and standing in crowds and not caring about having a mask on. And that worries me because my wife is she's got complications from illnesses. And, it doesn't seem fair to me that people can be that callous when they have the knowledge right in front of them about just how dangerous it is. And I'm talking about, forget just Hasidic Jews. I'm talking about, yahoos who live down the street who are waving their Confederate flag too, So,
well, you had a lot of African American ministers that defied the orders, and they met at church and so on. And there was a recent article I saw about a week ago, like 4 prominent African American ministers that have died of the virus, who were ridiculing it at the pulpit and saying God's going to protect them. I mean, this defiance of science in relationship to the evidence that's out there is mind-numbing. And we also, in the Hasidic community, and since I'm of Jewish descent, I can kind of poke fun of them, I think, to some degree, not to focus on them 100%, but they did this also a few years ago with the smallpox vaccine. And they were refusing, and the mumps and the measles, I believe, they were refusing to get vaccinated for this for religious reasons. And that affects the whole community, just like they're finding right now. So I think this is really stupid and short-sighted and shows flaws in their religious creeds.
Should we be wearing masks now on phase 2 in Florida?
Well, according to the doctors that I've talked to, if you don't know who you're dealing with, I mean, on one side we got to have the herd mentality. So the quicker we all get immune to this or have the herd mentality, the better. But on the other side, if you delay it a few more months, we have more testing and better medical treatments. It might be wise. And from what I understand now, the infection range from your sputtle coming out of your mouth is 6 feet. So that's something. So yes, I guess, Joey, if you're asking me as a military Holocaust historian, what I think scientifically we should do, masks seem to help. Is what they're telling us.
Well, we got to tell everybody also your father-in-law is a famous surgeon.
Yep. Yeah. He's Dr. Paul Stelzer. If any of you have mitral valve prolapse or aortic valve prolapse, you have leaky valves. And he's really good also with Jewish people, that when they come to him, if there's wiggle room to do a homeograph, a human valve versus a pig valve, he will go and lean toward doing a homeograph for them, especially if they're religious. He's very, very kind in this respect. But he is one of the leading experts in valve replacement surgery. He's at Mount Sinai. Wow. So yes, he's a very good guy in this respect, and it's amazing how many surgeries have been continually going on during this whole virus. Because when people need a heart operation, they need to get it done, and he's 73 years old and still cranking away. So thanks for asking about it.
He's a great doctor. I met him when I was he's from New York. He's in New York.
You did a whole program with him about 7-8 years ago when he went to Mount Sinai. You were very kind. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and I remember what he did for the Jews. He takes all the cream cheese out of your veins.
He does clean out the heart too, as well.
Here we go.
Yeah,
I want to read your books. Where can we get them? Obviously in the library, but where else can we find your books?
Well, thank you, Jay. So I have a website, Bryan Mark Rigg, Bryan with a Y, as in Yankee, and Mark Rigg, R-I-G-G. So it's bryanmarkrigg.com. So you can see all the books there. They're all sold on Amazon. And then I have an author's page on Facebook under my name, Bryan Mark Rigg. And if people want to get signed copies and whatnot, they can get in touch with me. I have a Venmo account, and they can pay me, and then I just send it off to them. So I appreciate it. The two books that are selling the best right now are still my landmark book from 2002 called Hitler's Jewish Soldiers, about Jews and men of Jewish descent who are the Nazi military. And then this recent book I wrote on Iwo Jima, Japan's Holocaust, and this famous Medal of Honor recipient, Woody Williams, and the book's called Flamethrower. And it's become very controversial in many respects because I found that this Medal of Honor recipient shouldn't have received the medal. In fact, the Commandant of the Marine Corps said for the package that was put in for him, he should not have gotten it. And we are looking at problems with politics. We're looking at embellishments of the story, and that there was a lot of things that got into the historical record that were not substantiated. And he's the only Marine Corps Medal of Honor recipient that I've documented from World War II. There was 82 of them out of 690,000 Marines during World War II. Out of the 82 guys who got it, he's the only one that the Marine Corps never sanctioned because the evidence wasn't there. But since Truman just came into being a president, he wanted to have a huge ceremony with alive guys, and he put pressure on Secretary of the Navy Forrestal to get him a lot of alive guys. He didn't want to give medals posthumously to dead guys. And so they pulled the medal process from the Marine Corps and fast-tracked it so he could have a lot of alive bodies at the Rose Garden in October 1945 to celebrate the end of the war and do something that was apolitical. So speaking of politics, coming full circle, Joey, not everything has politics in it. You really see how the sausage is made with these Medal of Honor recipients of World War II. And because these are our modern heroes. Our buildings, our hospitals, our ships are named after these guys. Books are written about them all the time because they got this medal. And so I really go into a deep dive of how these medals are conferred during World War II. And hopefully I've made it very interesting for the lay reader, and especially for Marines out there. So, Jay, thanks for the plug there. And, I've only written 5 books on World War II and the Holocaust, so I'll call you next week after you've read all of them, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts.
What did you do for Memorial Day?
I was blessed. I did a lot of stuff with promoting the book. I wrote a lot about Memorial Day, about different individuals in my book. There are probably about 20 guys I've documented who should have gotten the Medal of Honor, but the bureaucracy failed them. So from the week leading up to Memorial Day, I wrote miniature biographies, and they're on my author's page, of about 3 to 5 pages about these men, and I called them Forgotten Heroes of Iwo Jima for Memorial Day week or weekend. So that was what my main goal was for Memorial Day. And then also I helped my son, who's in the Sea Cadets, and he's very patriotic. He's 17 years old. He marched with the Marine Corps flag through Dallas along a trail for 25 miles.
Wow.
So I support him. We had torrential rains here, so that was my Memorial Day, gentlemen. And so thanks for the question, Joey.
Oh, I was very busy myself. I was watching Judge Judy.
Did he talk about patriotic things?
Oh, I switched over to Larry David. That'll do it. No, it's wonderful. I saw a clip of many people playing the taps. They had all of these amateurs that this guy put together on CBS television, I think, and that was the most dreadful sounding, haunting melody I've ever heard. I don't ever want to hear taps again. I don't like it. It's dreary and down.
On purpose. And It's supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be that way.
What I find is horrifying. My dad was a Navy navigator during the Korean conflict. And he was also a jazz musician. He was in a professional jazz band from 1950 to 1961. I grew up with Benny Goodman, Harry James, Armstrong. I mean, those were a lot of my heroes. And my dad was a trumpet player, very good at it. And whenever they had a funeral, he would play taps. And my dad would practice, and he would play that. And it is a very haunting, very somber, and very reflective of music. But I think, like Jay's saying, it gets you in the right mood to think, here is a fallen warrior, and we honor him and his service, and as he goes on to the great beyond, to the Valhalla and so on. So I actually like it. It makes me pause and I think of my 3 great-grandfathers who fought the Confederacy. That one grandfather I was telling you guys about that fought at Atlanta and Vicksburg, he also survived Andersonville, one of the most horrendous Confederate POW camps during, the Civil War. And so I think of these men. I'm like, okay, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. What am I doing? TAPS helps me a lot of times. Think, what am I doing to make this country better?
Yeah.
What am I doing to do the next right thing? And what am I doing for this sacrifice of this individual to make this country a better place for my own kids? So that's kind of what goes through my head. So that's also what I was thinking about during Memorial Day. And that's also what I kind of write about in those little biographies I wrote about, the men that are documented in my book, Flamethrower. That's what goes through my mind as a retired Marine officer and as an American patriot.
Well,
Jay here has survived. You want to talk? Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say that I cursed my son. We cursed our son with spelling the name Bryan as well. His first name is Bryan, and we used the Y instead of an I. And he, of course, has to change everybody's view of that all the time. It's amazing.
Well, yeah, it seems like the go-to most often when people spell our names, Jay, is with an I. You have to correct it. But I always tell people when they want to hear that my spelling and your son's spelling is actually the ancient way. If you look at Tyndale's Bible and you look at Old English, a lot of times where we now use I was Y.
Yeah.
And then I love that the namesake of the name of your son and me. Do you or do you not? Brian Boru, he's the king of Ireland. He's the only Irish king that defeated the Vikings in battle, and I believe it was in 1017. That he led his troops against the Vikings, defeated them. He was 77 years old, an old man wielding a longsword, and he died in battle. And that's why the name Bryan means strength and perseverance.
I was going to say that we can go to your site. And what is it again now, Bryan?
So my webpage is www.bryanmarkrigg, just my name, .com. And if you want to look me up and look up a lot of my writings and so on that I've done recently for Memorial Day, I have put that up on my authors page in Facebook. And it's just under my name, Bryan Mark Rigg, and you'll immediately find the authors page and see all the writings. And I really am trying to bring out information about my book, Flamethrower, that came out for the 75th anniversary of the Battle of Iwo Jima. Because I think, what I was fascinated by is I went to the National Archives in St. Louis with the personnel files there, in Washington, D.C., and then also College Park, Maryland, about all the units and the divisions that fought on this island. And I thought Iwo Jima, especially after Clint Eastwood's films, Letters from Iwo Jima and Flags of Our Fathers, would have been documented thoroughly. People would have known an awful lot about it. And I believe half the stuff I found out about the battle and the men who fought there have never seen the light of day in the historiography of these events, Iwo Jima and the events leading up to it. And so I was very fascinated by this. And so I was very keen on when this book came out to make sure it came out around this battle, a commemoration of the 75th. So it's
and the raising of the flag was not a legitimate picture either.
Well, it's very interesting. I talk a little bit about that in the book, and you bring up an interesting thing. So the famous flag raising on Iwo Jima was actually the second flag raising.
Yeah.
So what happened is when we took Mount Suribachi on the 23rd of February, 1945, we landed on the island on the 19th, and that's the high ground. You seize Suribachi because in the military, laws out there of war is you always seize the high ground. So once they got that high ground, they immediately put the first flag they basically had around up there to let everybody know we got it. It was a small, rinky-dink flag. And so there were some guys looking up at that flag going, okay, we got to get a bigger flag up there. Also, so many guys are souvenir hunting. There's going to be some knucklehead that goes up there in the night and steals that flag because that's the first flag flying over Japanese territory in 3,000 years. So we need to get that for the Regimental History Museum later on. So take this second flag and raise it. So they sent up a whole new group of guys to raise a second flag. And as they're raising it, you have Rosenthal, who basically takes the famous picture of that as they're raising the second flag up there. It wasn't staged or anything. but that was the second flag. So that wasn't the original flag raising. You're right to bring that up, Joey. But there's so much, that flag raising and the sacrifice of the Marines on Iwo Jima, a lot of people don't realize, probably saved the Marine Corps in post-war politics.
Yeah.
Right after the war, the Army wanted to disband the Marine Corps and assimilate it into the Army, saying we didn't need two armies. And we fought long and hard, Marines, to justify our role in amphibious warfare. And that photograph, because it's the most famous photograph in the history of warfare,
Right.
and the most published photograph from World War II, it basically saved the Marine Corps in many respects. You can make a very strong argument that battle and that picture preserved the Marine Corps today. And by 1949, Truman had to relent from this attack, and now Marine Corps officer is always on the Joint Chief of Staff, and it is the only service that is in law that it has to be around, because all the other services started at the beginning of our country. It just was kind of like a fait accompli. We knew we needed a Navy
and if you go to Kansas and you look up the Truman Diaries, you'll see that he was anti-Semitic too.
Unfortunately, they just came out with that in 2004. Yeah, he didn't like the Jews very much.
No.
He called them very whiny, and he fell into some of the traps of typical anti-Semitism, calling them greedy and rich.
But let's go back into the Confederate War. There was a famous meeting when Lee surrendered to Grant, and he said, "Well, now we'll have to serve the presidents." And Grant said, "There's only one president." That was his comment about Lincoln. But I really had a great talk with you today, and a great listening session to Jay.
Yeah.
Jay lived through the War of Imus, which was he was a Marine. And I found out that he was expelled from the Marine Corps. What do you call it when they throw you out?
Well, he got. Well, he said a bad word on the air. So
No, from the Marines.
Oh, the Marines. He
Yeah.
probably said a bad word there too.
Yeah, he did. I'm just playing. Anyway, thank you.
It was court
Brian, you're
martial, I
great.
think. I don't know.
Yeah, it was.
Thanks
No,
for
he
having
wasn't.
me, Joy. It's so good seeing you.
Yeah, you're great. You're great. So Bryan Rigg with an R-Y-A-N, Brian, and also
The right way of spelling, right, Jay?
Yes, indeed, the only way.
and that's Big Jay Sorensen. Don't forget
Yes,
Big Jay. Jay the Jock.
Yes.
Do your impression of Soupy Sales.
Well, aren't you nice? Well, I do not want you to be on with Joey Reynolds ever again. I'll throw a pie in your face.
Great.
Let a smile be your umbrella, but don't get a mouthful of rain.